I only invest in kids with high IQs. You heard that right. My father said those exact words when my uncle, Caleb, asked why he wouldn't give me money to go to college. And after that, I didn't step foot in the house I grew up in for the next 13 years. But then, when I became successful, they came back into my life, this time with a scheme to take what I had built, all to save their high IQ child. They didn't expect how fiercely I'd fight back, and how their plan would fail because of it. Follow my story and let me know what you think about the choices I made along the way. Hello everyone. My name is Charles, 35 years old. I live with my wife Grace and our little daughter Luna, who is 7, in a peaceful town about an hour's drive from Seattle. Life for the three of us isn't luxurious, but it's enough. I work as a department head at a real estate company, while Grace runs a small business selling children's clothes and toys. Together, our incomes are enough to fully care for our daughter, from her education and meals to our weekend outings. Luna is a bright, affectionate little girl who's always curious about the world. Every Saturday or Sunday, she excitedly picks a place to go. Sometimes a water park, sometimes just a new ice cream shop in the next neighborhood, and sometimes the zoo, where she's been fascinated with giraffes since she first saw them. My wife and I have never felt tired from those trips. On the contrary, we see them as little family dates, where the three of us can laugh freely and where Luna gets to be a child truly. At this point, I know some of you, especially those who often take your kids to visit their grandparents, might ask, why don't you take Luna to see her grandparents and relatives? Doesn't she have any other family? I understand that question. I don't take Luna to visit her grandparents because I don't want them to touch my daughter. I don't want their eyes glancing over Luna's face, don't want the hands that were once cold to be placed on her shoulders. I still have parents. They're alive, healthy, live in a big house, surrounded by relatives. But to me, they've been dead for 2 years now. Not dead from illness, but dead in our hearts. And I was the one who cut off that relationship for good when they tried to reconnect after all those years since I left home. 15 years ago, I left their house. I had just turned 18, about to start college. A milestone where any child deserves care, encouragement, even just a simple congratulations from their parents. But for me, that moment was when I made my final decision, to walk away from the home I had lived in for 18 years. I didn't leave out of anger, and it wasn't because of a sudden argument. I left because they never truly valued me in that house, no matter how hard I tried. All their attention and financial support went to Lucas, my younger brother. Lucas is 4 years younger than me. When we were both little, our parents treated us fairly equally. We got gifts on birthdays, went to the park together, and enrolled in the same classes. But all of that slowly faded as we got older. Specifically, starting from one evening when Lucas was still in elementary school. I don't remember exactly if I was 11 or 12, just that it was a weekday evening. During dinner, my mom excitedly shared that Lucas's teacher said he had an IQ well above his classmates. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, and her voice couldn't hide her pride. My dad was thrilled, too. He looked at Lucas and said, "This boy's got real potential." From that night on, how things were at home started to change. Not in an obvious, drastic way at first, but enough that I could feel it little by little. When I was 13, I asked my mom to buy me a science fiction novel. It wasn't even $10. She shook her head and said we'd spent too much that month and shouldn't waste money on unnecessary things. I didn't say anything. I folded up the book flyer I'd brought home from the school library. But the next day, Lucas came home with a brand new programmable Lego set, designed for kids with a knack for math and engineering. Cost several times more than the book I had asked for. When I asked my mom about it, she didn't answer immediately. She just gave me a sharp look and said coldly, "Your brother has a high IQ. Lego is great for his development." Then my dad chimed in, without even looking up from the evening news. "Your mom's right. Don't compete with your brother. If you had a high IQ like him, we'd be just as willing to invest in you." I still remember that sentence word for word. Not because it was cruel, but because it was so clear that nothing more needed to be said about their favoritism. Their favoritism grew stronger over the years, and I still remember some moments that made it obvious. When I was 14, my teacher chose me to be part of the school's science project presentation team. Only 6 students were selected. I brought the announcement home, hoping to hear a few words of encouragement. But at dinner that night, as soon as I started to share, my mom cut me off. "Lucas has his advanced math test tomorrow. Don't distract him." My dad said nothing, just nodded and turned to ask my brother if he needed more practice tests printed. When I was 17, my career counselor told me about an early college exposure program, a chance to visit and experience college life for a week at an in-state university. I brought the information home and placed it neatly on the table. The next morning, my mom glanced at it and asked, "Is Lucas old enough to apply?" No one asked if I wanted to go. Then, at 18, I got my college acceptance letter. It was a public university with reasonable tuition and a clear major. I handed the letter to my dad, holding on to a small hope that maybe this time would be different. He glanced at it and said, "You're 18 now. You're on your own." After that, I didn't argue. I already knew where I stood in that house. 1 month later, I moved into the campus dorms and began my life away from my family. But if that were all there was to it, it wouldn't have been enough for me to cut ties with my family for 13 years. I made that decision for a different reason, one that came during the first Christmas after I left home. That Christmas, during my first year of college, my mom called and asked me to come home for the family party. For 4 months since I'd left to start college, neither she nor my dad had called even once to check on me. So when that call came, even though her voice was as flat and indifferent as ever, I genuinely felt happy. I thought maybe they had changed. Maybe my quiet departure had given them time to reflect on everything. And maybe, just maybe, things would be different this time when I returned. For nights leading up to it, I imagined the scene. Dad shaking my hand at the door, Mom asking if I'd been eating well, and both of them finally saying that they saw I'd grown up, that I mattered, too, that they were wrong for leaving me behind. I convinced myself of that fantasy. I truly believed they had finally acknowledged me. But that Christmas party shattered all of it in one cruel instant. That day, I came home earlier than the time Mom had told me, partly to avoid traffic but mostly because I was eager to see them again. I brought a bottle of wine, $30 from my part-time job, spent on a red from Oregon, just because I remembered Dad once saying he wanted to try Oregon Reds. Only a few early guests were there when I pushed the door open. The house was still quiet. I strolled down the hallway toward my room when I heard the voice of Uncle Caleb, my dad's younger brother, talking with him in the living room. The door was slightly ajar. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but I froze the moment I heard Uncle's question, clear as day. I heard Charles had to take out student loans and work part-time to pay for college, and then came Dad's answer, word for word, without hesitation. "I only invest in the one with a high IQ." A few seconds later, he added, in a lower voice but with zero doubt, "This family only needs Lucas. As for Charles, he can leave and never come back." After hearing those words from my father, I don't even remember what happened in my head. I remember my hand shaking, and in a split second, the bottle of wine slipped out of my grip and shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed sharp and dry in the house I was supposed to call home. Uncle Caleb turned around and saw me. His face looked uneasy, maybe even slightly regretful, but not enough to say he was on my side. As for my dad, he gave me a single glance, then said coldly, "Low IQ and clumsy too. Clean that up." Right after Dad said that, Uncle Caleb snapped. He didn't bother saving face for his brother anymore, no softening the blow or sugarcoating. He looked Dad straight in the eye and said, "What the hell are you even saying, Austin?" Without waiting for a response, he turned to me. His voice softened, trying to calm me down. "Charles, listen to me. Your dad's probably just messing around. Don't take it to heart. Come on out here with me." He stepped toward me and touched my shoulder, trying to lead me away, but I didn't go. I gently pulled away, looked him in the eye and said, "I'm fine." Then I turned to Dad, stared straight at him and said, "If that's how you feel, then I'll stay out of your sight from now on, just the way you want it. And remember, you've only got one kid. That's Lucas." When I said it, Dad slammed his hand down on the table. The sharp crack echoed through the room. He shouted, voice shaking with fury, "What did you just say?" Then he lunged at me, arm raised like he was about to do something even he couldn't control. Luckily, Uncle Caleb stepped in just in time. He threw both arms out to block Dad, trying to hold him back, then turned and yelled, "Run, Charles!" But I didn't run. I stood my ground, eyes locked on him. I wanted him to see me. Not as the kid who used to shrink away every time he raised his voice, not as the son he could dismiss and ignore like before. A few seconds later, my mom and Lucas rushed into the room. But instead of asking what was going on, instead of trying to understand what pushed things this far, she immediately raised her voice. "What did you do now, Charles? You just got home, and you're already causing trouble?" I stood there in silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because that moment I was wondering, If it had been Lucas standing here, if Dad had gone after him like that, humiliated him like that, would she have said the same thing? I didn't need an answer. The way she spoke said it all. She blamed me without knowing a single detail, as if she'd seen everything, understood everything, when really, she hadn't seen a thing, hadn't asked a thing, hadn't cared to hear a word from me. And right then, with Uncle Caleb still out of breath, Dad's face tight with rage, and Mom throwing accusations without reason, I knew I was wrong. It's wrong to believe they could change. Wrong to think there was still a place for me in this house. And most of all, wrong to ever come back. Right after my mom and Lucas walked in, I didn't wait another minute. I left, quietly but with finality. On the bus ride back to the dorm that night, I sat with my head resting against the window, listening to the soft screech of the tires every time the bus slowed down. The outside world slipped past under dim yellow streetlights, and I let my mind drift back to everything that had just happened a few hours earlier. Every word, every look, every reaction played on a loop in my head, like someone was forcing me not to forget. At that moment, surrounded by the thick silence of the bus, a resolve settled in me more clearly than ever before. I had to succeed. Not to get revenge, not to prove anything to anyone, but to live a life where I'd never have to set foot in that house again. And I kept the promise I made to myself that night. After 4 years of college, I graduated with strong enough results to be offered a job right where I had interned. I didn't have to job hunt, didn't have to send out applications, didn't have to knock on doors. They offered, I accepted, and I knew it wasn't out of pity. It was something I earned on my own. And through that job, I met Grace, the woman who would later become my wife. I still remember that afternoon clearly, almost 9 years ago. I was on duty at the office, handling paperwork for a block of rental apartments. Around 1 p.m., Grace walked in with a stack of documents. She looked a little flustered but still perfectly composed and polite. After sitting across from me, she started talking about the apartment she was interested in, and I was assigned to assist her that day. After the usual small talk, the conversation flowed surprisingly naturally. No awkward pauses, no guardedness. I didn't know why, but after that meeting, I held on to her application a bit longer than necessary. Neither of us knew where things would go from there, but it felt like an invisible thread was tying us together at that moment. In the following days, we started with short conversations at the office whenever Grace needed more advice. Then it turned into coffee after work and eventually a few evening walks downtown on the weekends. I wasn't in a rush at the time, and neither was Grace. Neither of us tried to make it overly romantic. We just felt at ease being around each other. 2 months after that first meeting, we officially started dating. And 2 years later, we decided to move in together, having gone through all the highs and lows that come with love. Our wedding was simple, just like the two of us. We invited close friends and a few relatives from Grace's side. Her family welcomed me with ease, making sure there was no room that day for me to think about the people I didn't invite. No one from my family was there, not because they were busy, but because I didn't tell them. I didn't invite them. The only person I informed was Uncle Caleb, who stood between me and Dad on that Christmas night I'll never forget. He came alone, gave me a firm handshake, and said just one thing before finding his seat. Now you've got a real family. About a year after the wedding, Luna was born. Even though we thought we were ready, our whole world flipped upside down once she arrived. Our routine fell apart. Every night ran later than planned. But in return, there was laughter, a kind of chaos that felt warm, and a real sense of having a place to come home to. During those years, Grace and Luna became like a thick blanket covering all the memories I didn't want to revisit. About my family, parents, and Lucas. I used to think that if anything remained between me and them, it was no more than a thread that had already snapped. And if it had broken, we should each live our lives separate and untouched. But once again, I was wrong. After 13 years of silence, they forced their way back into my life. And this time, it wasn't out of love or family ties. This time, it was because of a plan they'd been brewing. One that kicked in as soon as they found out we had just bought our first home. A small house in the suburbs, about a 30-minute drive from the city. Price tag, nearly $800,000. I remember it clearly. It was a Sunday, exactly 1 week before Christmas, 2 years ago. That morning, around 8 a.m., Grace and I were packing up for a weekend picnic with Luna. I was looking for the car keys when the doorbell suddenly rang, fast and insistent. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe a neighbor needed something. But the moment I opened the door, I froze. Standing right in front of me were my parents. They stood there like it was just a casual visit. And before I could say anything, My mother spoke first, her voice cheerful. "Hi, son. It's been so long. Can we come in?" I swear, my first instinct was to shut the door immediately. But I didn't. I stepped aside and let them in. Not because I had forgiven them, but because I didn't want to create a scene in front of my wife and daughter. When she stepped inside and saw Luna, my mom's face lit up. She bent down with the biggest smile she could manage. "So this is my granddaughter already? I'm your grandma, sweetie." Luna was only 5 then. Still too young to understand what grandma meant, especially since I had never mentioned them to her. She just ran to Grace and clung tightly to her leg. Standing next to me, Grace smiled politely and said, "Hello." A few minutes later, we all sat in the living room. The air was still stiff and awkward. My mom broke the silence, speaking like this had all been pre-planned. "Christmas is next week. Your father and I came to invite you and your family. Everyone keeps asking about you because you haven't been home in so long." After she said that, I looked at her for a moment, then answered plainly, "I'm not going. Lucas is all that house needs." Right after I said that, I saw her expression falter momentarily. Then her voice softened like she was trying to smooth things over. "You're still holding on to the past? We were a little harsh back then, but can't you just let it go?" I didn't respond. She kept going. "Your relatives always ask about you. You should come back. Bring your wife and daughter, let everyone meet them. Let the little one know who her grandparents are." I sat and listened to all of it. Then I replied, short and clear, "I'll think about it. If there's nothing else, I'd like you both to leave. We have plans." After that, they got up soon enough. Things stayed polite on the surface, but no one was truly at ease. Right before stepping out the door, my father looked around the house and said, like he was trying to end the visit on a positive note, "Big house. Beautiful, too. It must have cost a lot. We're proud of you." I didn't answer, not because I was angry, but because I didn't believe him. At that moment, those words meant nothing to me anymore. About 5 minutes after my parents left the house, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was Uncle Caleb. I answered right away. Before I could say anything, he spoke first. His voice was low, a bit hesitant as he'd rehearsed it, but he still felt the need to ask permission. "I'm sorry, Charles. I was the one who told your parents that you bought a house." I didn't respond right away. I leaned gently against the kitchen counter, eyes on Grace and Luna as they tidied up the half-eaten breakfast. In my ear, his voice continued steady and sincere. "At first, I thought, they should know what you've made of yourself, not to brag so they'd see where they went wrong." I stayed quiet for a moment. I didn't feel angry. I wasn't even annoyed. What happened that morning, if it surprised me, it was only because of the timing. I had always known they'd come back eventually, one way or another. Then I told him, my voice calm, "It's okay, Uncle. Maybe it's for the best." After that, I said goodbye, ended the call, and returned to the table. Grace was folding the napkins. She looked up at me and asked softly, as if she already had some idea what had happened, "Do you want to go back?" The question caught me off guard, but I didn't hesitate. Not even 2 seconds. "No. We'll have Christmas right here at home." I thought that would be the end of it. But Grace stayed seated, silent for a few seconds. Then she set the napkin down, looked at me more seriously, and said, this time not as a question, but as something to think about, "If we don't go, they'll come back. This time it was just a failed invite. Next time it'll be someone else. But if we go, even just once, at least we'll know what they're after." After she said that, I looked at her for a long moment. There was no pressure in her eyes, no guilt on my behalf. She said what needed to be said and left the choice to me. A few minutes later, I nodded. Not because I had softened, but because I knew she was right. If this chapter needed to be closed, it had to be closed clearly, no loose ends. There are no cracks left for someone to push the door back open. And sometimes, if you want to end something for good, you have to take one last step toward it first. A week later, after a non-stop 3-hour drive, I arrived at the house I grew up in. Everything around me looked almost the same. The place hadn't aged much, but something inside me had changed completely. Most of the extended family had already arrived by the time I arrived. Just a few were still missing. While I opened the trunk to get Luna's things, Uncle Caleb came out quickly. He shook my hand with both of his, gripping it tightly. He didn't say a word, but I could feel the reassurance in his eyes. My mother was different. The moment she saw Luna, she practically ran over. Even though it was only the second time she'd seen her, she hugged her. Her voice syrupy like they were lifelong friends. But Luna wasn't used to her. Like the last time, she instinctively pulled away and ran back to grab Grace's leg. After parking the car properly and gathering Luna's things, we went inside. A few older relatives greeted us first. They hadn't changed much, except that time now showed clearly on their faces. I greeted each of them politely, just enough. There were some I didn't recognize at all. Some of the cousins I remembered from years ago had grown up. One looked older than me. Overall, the atmosphere of the gathering was decent. It was apparent my mom had spent a lot of time preparing. Just as I was chatting with a few relatives, Lucas showed up. One hand in his pocket, the other extended for a handshake, with that smug smile on his face. "Welcome home, bro." I didn't take his hand, because the thing I hate most is when someone tries to shake your hand with the other still shoved in their pocket. And he knew that. About 30 minutes after we got settled, the party officially began. It had been a long time since Grace, and I had been to such a large gathering. The place was well decorated, the food was abundant, and soft background music played steadily from a speaker in the corner. Luna, just 5 years old at the time, was thrilled. She swayed along to the music, singing the melodies even though she didn't know the lyrics. Pure, carefree, and full of energy. I watched her for a long moment, and then I wondered if I'd made a mistake bringing her here. Even though the atmosphere seemed cheerful, laughter filled the room, food kept coming, and everything seemed festive. This strange feeling was growing in my chest. A quiet unease, like a chill slipping through my collar even though the windows were closed tight. And then, almost an hour into the party, the feeling proved correct. By then, most people had finished eating. A few of the older relatives were talking louder, the younger ones had started to feel the alcohol, and the laughter was getting louder with every refill. In a moment that felt oddly timed, just when everything seemed most calm, my mother stood up, walked over to the speaker, and took the microphone as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She began to speak, and every word she said after that felt like a slow, twisting knife to my chest. All over again, right in front of my wife, my daughter, and a room full of family. The moment she got hold of the microphone, my mother first thanked everyone for coming to the gathering. Right after the thank you, the room filled with enthusiastic applause. I saw a few people nodding, some raising their glasses as if in agreement. As soon as the clapping died down, she continued, "Today, we're so happy to have our eldest son, Charles, back with his family after more than a decade away from our family gatherings because he's been working far from home." At that, I let out a small laugh, a quiet one, half bitter, half amused. Working far from home? Did they think I'd forgotten who pushed me away from this dinner table in the first place? But she didn't stop there. Her tone shifted, more proud now, like she was reading off a list of accomplishments. "Charles is now 33, and he's the pride of our family. He bought an $800,000 home without borrowing a single cent from anyone." The applause came again, this time even louder. I saw a few relatives look over at me. Some nodded, some patted the person next to them and said things like, "That's impressive, huh? Got that Mason blood. Whatever he's doing, he's tough. That's for sure." I didn't react to any of it. I just sat there, back straight, hands on my thighs, eyes locked on my mother, waiting to see how far she'd take this. And then, she went all the way. Her voice sharpened slightly as if speaking for those who might not have heard. "But what we're most proud of isn't the house Charles bought. It's the sacrifice he's made for this family." She paused for a second, letting the silence settle around her, then went on. "Charles knows his younger brother, Lucas, is going through a tough time. So he's decided to sell the house he just bought and give Lucas $300,000 to help him get back on his feet." Right after that sentence, I heard a soft clink to my left. Someone had just set their glass down in shock. My ears started to buzz, and the room, so loud with clapping just a moment ago, was now dead silent. That was it. My gut had been right the whole time. I'd known something was off from the start, but I hadn't imagined they'd go this far. They stood there and told a bold-faced lie. Right in front of me, right in front of my wife, right in front of my daughter. Just as the whispers among the relatives started spreading across the dinner table, I stood up. I didn't say anything to Grace. I didn't look at anyone. I walked straight toward my mother, reached out, and took the microphone from her hand. As soon as I touched it, she leaned in and whispered urgently in my ear, "Don't embarrass your parents." But it was already too late. I didn't respond to her. I stepped aside and turned to face the entire room. My voice rang out, calm, steady, not loud, but loud enough to bring the room to silence. "So this This is why you drove over 3 hours to my house to invite me to Christmas dinner. A few people near the front glanced at each other. I heard the soft scrape of chairs shifting. But I didn't stop. I turned toward my mother, voice still steady but firm. Stop making things up. I never said I'd sell my house to pay Lucas's debts. I didn't promise. I disagreed. Whoever made the debt is the one responsible for it. I paused for a moment, then continued, my voice dropping slightly. And another thing, I haven't come home for the last 13 years. Not even once. And never once did you call to check on me in those 13 years. Not once. And it all started because you and Dad always showed favoritism. Always chose Lucas. I turned to my father then, looked straight at him and asked, do you remember the day you said, I only invest in the one with the higher IQ? And, this house only needs Lucas. If Charles leaves, good riddance? Immediately, he jumped up, furious, and shouted, you're making that up. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the room. Uncle Caleb's voice, coming from the right side of the table. Charles is telling the truth. That day, if I hadn't stepped in to stop it, that boy might have been hit by Austin. The entire room fell silent. All eyes turned to Uncle Caleb, and my father nearly shouted, so you're betraying your brother now? But Uncle Caleb didn't back down. He looked around the room and said clearly to everyone present, what happened 13 years ago? I was the only relative who saw it. I arrived early that day. I heard it all. I saw everything. I stayed quiet for 13 years, thinking things would settle with time. But today, seeing Charles still being treated this way, I can't keep silent anymore. He didn't look at my father when he said that. He looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw someone standing on my side. Right after Uncle Caleb finished speaking, the room went almost entirely silent. No one shouted. No one argued. But one by one, in quiet clusters, people began standing up, gathering their things and leaving the party. No explanations needed. I heard a few murmurs near the door. Don't bother inviting me next time. Throwing a party for this mess. I didn't look their way. I stood up, took Luna's hand, and gave Grace a signal. We left the party right then and there. That night, in every sense of the word, marked the final break between me and the family I once belonged to. There was nothing left to mend. There is nothing left to pretend. The very next day, once we got home, I filed for a restraining order against both my parents. I didn't want them showing up at my door, calling Grace, or suddenly hugging Luna like nothing had ever happened. A week later, under pressure from relatives who witnessed everything, they reappeared. Same doorstep, same faces, but this time no yelling, no harsh words. When I held out the court order, my mother stared at me for a long moment. Then she said just one thing, you're so cruel. And with that, she turned and walked away without looking back. And just like that, 2 years have passed since that Christmas night. I'm still living a peaceful life. I have Grace, Luna, and a home I genuinely want to return to at the end of each day. And now that joy is about to double. Grace just told me, we're expecting another baby. I don't know how my child will face the world someday. But one thing I do know, they'll grow up in a home where kindness is never something they have to trade for. If you're listening to this and still torn between holding on to an old relationship just because they're family or choosing to live your own life, I want to say this. No one has the right to interfere with a life you've spent years building for yourself. And sometimes, keeping your distance from people who once hurt you isn't cold or heartless. It's simply your way of saying to yourself, I deserve to live a kind life, surrounded by people who truly value me. If you're hearing these words and have ever felt guilty for setting boundaries with family, remember this. Not everyone who gave you life has the right to keep hurting you. Family, sometimes, is the one you build for yourself. And as long as that place has safety, love, and someone willing to walk with you, you already have everything you need. And before I wrap up the story, I want to ask you, those of you who've stayed with me until the very end of this journey, was I wrong for setting boundaries, choosing to walk away, and refusing to let anyone else interfere in the life I've worked so hard to protect? If you were in my shoes, if you had to choose between staying silent to keep the peace in your family or speaking up to stand up for yourself, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear what you think. And if this story resonated with you, even just a little, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join me on the following chapters of this journey. Thank you so much.